When you talk about players from last year's team that could pop this year, Kenyon Sadiq is at the top of my list. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Lots to get to today. N'Faly Dante's waiver denied. Got plenty of thoughts there, and Jay Billis is on Oregon's side. That can't be all bad news. And baseball's getting ready for regional, and it's not going to be easy. It is certainly doable, though. But we start with pop candidates for next year because I think Kenyon Sadiq is at the top of this list. So I'm going to give you three names who I think from last year's team that had a tiny role or essentially non-existent role could have an impact this year that is significantly different from what they put on the field a year ago. And this is factoring in talent, position group, playing time, everything. So Kenyon Sadiq is my first one. I am a big part. I'm going to appoint myself director of the Kenyon Sadiq fan club. And I think I can retroactively make this appointment as well because ever since he got recruited, I thought this guy could do some really special things. And next year, when Oregon loses their top two tight ends, T. Ferg and Patrick Herbert, Sadiq is in line to be the number one, and he could be awesome. And I think he's already a good player. But a season ago, really didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but his athletic profile is just not like other tight ends. And I think we're going to see him more on the field this season than we did a year ago. And I'll tell you why in just a sec. But in 2023, Sadiq had just 5 catches for 26 yards and a touchdown. He also had 1 carry for 12 yards. Just let it simmer. Just think about that for a moment. Now, the two guys in front of him, Patrick Herbert, 15 catches, just under 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. T. Ferg, the number one tight end, had 42 catches, over 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. So you had 636 total receiving yards amongst the tight ends last year. If you project that same number roughly onto Oregon's tight end room going into 2024, I think you could see this be a little bit more evened out, or at the very least, I think Sadiq is going to push at least for a 100-yard receiving season, if not more. And at the very least, he'll have more touches, and I think he'll be, into the several hundred yards in terms of just total yardage gained from the line of scrimmage. But I think he's someone that could push Patrick Herbert for that number 2 tight end spot. Not sure if he can get T. Ferg and be the number 1 guy, but by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Sadiq on the field more than Patrick Herbert, who's a solid player. Sadiq is just a better athlete. He's got a much higher ceiling, and if he starts to realize his potential, and he's one of those guys that's bulked up in the offseason when he came into spring camp, he's just going to pass Herbert because he's just a more athletic player, and Herbert's dealt with some injuries and does a solid job, but Sadiq can be much, much better. And here's the other reason he's kind of at the top of my list, or near the top of my list at the very least. He can be used in so many different ways. You can put him in the backfield. You can have him be offset kind of as an H-back. You can line him up on the end as a traditional tight end. You could split him out wide. Like, he is a true Brock Bowers type. No one is Brock Bowers himself because that guy is freakishly talented. But Sadiq is someone who you can put in the backfield as a 3-man backfield. You can run him into the flat on those RPO triple option plays where, it's hand the ball off, keep it, or dump it to a guy in the flat. They did that a couple times last year. You can use him on tight end fly sweeps. You can use him on pop passes. He's just such a versatile weapon. I think Will Stein, who, spoke earlier this spring about, Sadiq and the potential he has and everything he can do, I think that's going to come to fruition this year. I think that you are going to see kind of the next step in his career progression, which at the moment is following a more traditional, recruited as a high school guy, play a little as a true freshman. I think he plays more as a sophomore, and then he's an outright starter, pushing to be an all-conference guy as a junior. So I think Sadiq and the way that he can be used within the offense is going to allow him to be there. One thing I've thought about is they showcased in the spring game that split backfield, which Oregon had great success with in 2022. They might have felt they just didn't have the personnel to do that in 2023. I think a backfield in the red zone of Jay Harris and Kenyon Sadiq, and one can lead block for the other, I think that'd be awesome. I think that would be fantastically awesome. So Sadiq is my first pop candidate. Second one, Amari Washington. Oregon lost 4 defensive tackles from last year's team. That's a lot. They lost their starting 4 defensive tackles, by the way. I think they have greater top-of-the-line depth. Dorless is a tough guy to replace, but I think between Caldwell and Derek Harmon, you can get even more production than you got from the interior last year. But there are going to be a group of redshirt freshmen that fit in here as rotation guys. And look, maybe Aiden Breland or Jericho Johnson, Teone Gray, true freshmen showed some stuff in the spring game. Teone Gray especially, but Amari Washington is a redshirt freshman, and I think that's a guy, that's kind of my throw something in the wall and see what sticks in terms of which redshirt freshman 2023 4-star defensive lineman is going to pop this year. I'm going with Amari Washington because he looks like the biggest of the bunch and he's played the most so far in his career. But it wouldn't shock me if it's a Mikael Gardner or a Terrence Green. All those guys, based on how they were recruited, seem very capable. So Washington's someone who needs to make an impact for Oregon this year, and I think he's capable of doing so. And, really was, for the most part, just kind of sitting on the side and watching a year ago. But he's going to have to fill, or someone is going to have to step in and fill that role. But Washington's someone who logged just 73 snaps last year. He could very well be the number 3 defensive tackle. Harmon, Caldwell, and then everything is up for grabs. But I think that's a great place to be. You got a bunch of young guys. You want them to go in there and be hungry and have to push each other for snaps and playing time. So I think he could do that. And, Keon Ware-Hudson, he'll be in the mix as well. I think we know what Keon is at this point in his career. He's, serviceable, solid, but not a high impact dude. And if one of these redshirt freshmen showcase, hey, I can make a lot of impact plays when I get an opportunity, then there's a good chance they see the field. Another one I'm going with here. Don't know if a lot of you would go in this direction, but I'm going to go with Tyler Turner as a pop candidate for 2024. Oregon lost 5 safeties from last year's room, which is a crazy thing to think about, but Evan Williams, Steve Stevens, Damon David, Brian Addison, and Cole Martin was technically a safety or nickel a season ago. Either Tyler Turner, Aaron Flowers, or Peyton Woodyard are going to play this year. I think Turner is going to have an opportunity. Having a year ahead of guys like Woodyard and Aaron Flowers certainly can't be it can only be an advantage because the coaches know you. They've seen you a little bit in game action, whatnot. You've had more time to learn the system and everything. Someone with freshman attached to their name, either redshirt or a true, is going to be on the 2 deep in that Oregon secondary at the safety position. And Tyler Turner, has stuck around. Cody DeCambra, of course, hit the transfer portal. And Oregon's got other candidates in there. Solomon Davis is reportedly, who was a 2023 recruit. He could have been on this list as well. He's apparently made the position switch over to safety. That could be a guy who pops here, but I really like Tyler Turner coming out of high school. And, when I've seen him in little snippets, I think he looks pretty solid, and it looks like he can be a rangy playmaker on the back end of that defense. And that opportunity is going to be presented because you're just not going to have a bunch of safeties out there for Oregon after the top guys. And if somebody gets hurt, has to come out for a play, or just needs a spell, or gets dinged up during the course of a game, then you're going to have somebody pretty young stepping up on the back end of that defense. And I think Tyler Turner could be one of those guys. Let me know who you think is going to be a pop candidate. Qualifications, or the criteria rather, have to have been on last year's team and not had a major role. And I think we can all reasonably define what major role is. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. And N'Faly Dante's waiver got denied, which is discouraging, but all hope is not lost just yet. This episode of Locked On Ducks is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Green cup, Oregon, green, you get it. Second segment sips, essential. All right, let's talk about N'Faly Dante again. So, not the ruling Oregon fans were hoping for initially, and the waiver application to get an extra year of eligibility has been denied. Dante's looking for a 6th year of college basketball with the Ducks. Essentially, the foundation is that over the course of 2 seasons, he played 18 games total. He played 6 games in the COVID year, and the year prior, he got hurt when COVID canceled the season. He only played 12. That's how his career began. Then he finally got healthy, and of course, he has been exceptionally good. So I think that for Dante, it's discouraging at the moment, but all hope is not lost. So this you cannot undersell the importance of what happened in the moments after Dante's waiver was denied by the NCAA, and Oregon's going to appeal the decision, as they should, because what do you have to lose? Jay Billis came out in staunch support of N'Faly Dante, and putting public pressure like that from a national media figure on the NCAA cannot hurt. So here's what Jay Billis had to say in a tweet, quote, "The NCAA's treatment of Oregon's N'Faly Dante is simply outrageous. This young man is everything," in all caps, "the NCAA claims it wants in an athlete. Dante has been injured throughout his career, and he has played 2 full seasons less than players like Armando Bacot, yet he's denied an additional year due to injury, ending his career. Absurd. Dante is a model athlete and person, true, wants to come back to play and advance his education, and has never asked his school for anything. When the NCAA says, quote, athlete welfare, end quote, it rings hollow. The NCAA needs to do the right thing. Allow Dante his additional year immediately," and he tagged Oregon men's basketball, March Madness, and the NCAA. So, the reason that's important is N'Faly Dante is going to go through this appeal process, and there have been instances in which the NCAA rules one way, and the public kind of makes an effort, makes a push, advocates on a guy's behalf to say he should be able to play, and then they reverse course. Now, the most recent example of this was Tez Walker, the wide receiver at North Carolina, who was denied a waiver to be immediately eligible despite being a 2-time transfer, which now looks extra ridiculous because athletes are allowed to transfer as many times as they want without any restrictions from the NCAA. So, that's a different conversation. So, he was denied a waiver for just ridiculous reasons. Like, he had all the right criteria for why someone should get to transfer a second time, and the NCAA said no, and there was a lot of public outcry. Josh Pate talked about it on his show. You had College Game Day pundits talking about that. You had Mac Brown in North Carolina all lobbying for this, and then eventually he was approved to play towards the latter part of the season. Better late than never, but it was still a little bit late. Now, in this instance, it would certainly be better late than never if Dante, wasn't allowed to play the start of the year, but then, halfway through, 2/3 of the way into it, he was then allowed to play. That'd be better than nothing. But Oregon's going through this process right now, so hopefully there's enough time to get him approved. And so then he's also got an NBA draft decision that he has to work with. This situation is complicated, though. On the surface, there was a debate going back and forth between Matt Prame and I think it was Kevin Streelman or somebody. I don't remember I don't remember his name, but he was going back and forth about Dante getting hurt here, and would it matter if he gets hurt in this year? Kevin Sweeney is the guy's name, and Kevin Sweeney is anti-Dante getting another year of eligibility because he should. And Sweeney covers college basketball, so it's a little bit odd that he's so staunchly against it. Like, Dante's an awesome player and an awesome guy, and he has a case. However, I do think Kevin raises an interesting point. And so the ruling that came down essentially said Dante got hurt and only played in 6 games during the COVID year. If Dante had been hurt and only played 6 games this past year, medical waiver would have 100% been granted. What Oregon is essentially suggesting is that because it happened in the COVID year when Dante got hurt, he's being penalized for being injured in that specific season. So other guys have gotten a 6th year of eligibility. There have been multiple other college basketball players who have gotten a 6th year of eligibility. And those guys had a COVID year and then it got injured a different year. So that's the conundrum. And I see this. Obviously, I support Dante getting another year because he had 2 seasons total in which he played 18 games. Like that's just not. And the point that Billis makes in his tweet in support of Dante and Oregon's request here, lays it out perfectly. Like, hey, this guy over here, Armando Bacot, and this is not a shot at Armando Bacot, fantastic basketball player. He's played, it's something like 40, it's dozens. He's played dozens and dozens more games. I think it was like 170 versus 100 total games in his college basketball career. So why are you saying that Dante's out of eligibility here? The conundrum and what Oregon, I think, wasn't able to get past in this initial ruling and might struggle with in the appeal as well, is that the injury occurred during the COVID year. Like, can you double up getting an extra year when things that give you an extra year happen in the same season? If I'm not explaining that correctly, shoot me a message and I'll clarify. But that's kind of the crux of it, is it's bad luck and bad timing. But the other factor as well is that, he didn't have the opportunity to play in the COVID year. And then once he got hurt, the rehab wasn't the same. He's been given 5 years of eligibility already, but has he actually played 5 years worth of college basketball? No. So that's where the back and forth comes in. And I thought that point raised by Kevin Sweeney was what was a valid one. And the counterpoint is, so he should have gotten hurt a different year. Yeah, but he didn't get hurt a different year. He got hurt in that season. And so that's what Oregon has to persuade the NCAA on, is they have to say, look, he has not used up 5 years worth of eligibility. He should be able to get another one. And I think public pressure can work. Public pressure can be effective. And, the NCAA has been taking it on the chin in the courts recently. So maybe they're looking for wins. I don't know. I mean, no one ever really knows what the NCAA is doing, thinking why they're doing it or why they rule this way or that way. So I find that to be interesting, to say the least, and worth continue to follow, because this is definitely not over. Oregon's going to continue to try to push for this as they should. I think it's tricky. I think he should get it. However, if they rule that he's not going to get that 6th year of eligibility, then I understand where they'd be coming from, as crappy as it would be. Like, if he'd only played 6 games in the 2019-20 season when they didn't have postseason, then, the line for, I believe the line for getting a medical red shirt for football, it's 4 games to get any kind of red shirt. And for basketball, it's 9. So playing 12 games the year prior, like he should have played 3 games prior or been more hurt. I don't know. It all gets kind of weird and finicky, but that's the latest on it. And Oregon now sends that to the appeal. And if it gets approved, that's a Final Four capable team. And if it doesn't get approved, then, I cannot believe Oregon was hosting a transfer the other day, but they were. And it was a transfer from Miami, or that might be happening this weekend. I don't remember specifically, but John Rothstein reported that. So they're still looking to make moves to improve their roster. Roster looks pretty great. Could still get even better if this goes Oregon's way. So for those of you that are baseball fans, stick around, because I have thoughts going into their regional matchup, which starts later today as this show airs. All right, real quick before I get to baseball, one of you asked me a question about whether Jaquan McCroy is the biggest guy in all of college football. I wasn't able to find players in every conference, but there was a database of the largest players on every SEC roster going into 2024, and they tend to have the biggest guys. Maybe there are players in the Big Ten or ACC that I'm missing here, but Jaquan McCroy, Oregon four-star freshman offensive tackle, is 6'8", 365 pounds. There are two other guys that are listed at least 6'8", and 365 or above. They're actually listed at that exact same height and weight, and they are Florida offensive lineman Cameron Waits and Georgia offensive lineman Nair Daniels, who I presume are both offensive tackles. So those are among the biggest guys. I don't think that there were players listed for every team, and McCroy was either an inch or two or three taller or a few pounds heavier than the guys on every other SEC team. So, yeah, it's a pretty massive guy. But, all right, let's talk about baseball here before I get to a fun baseball question to wrap up today's show that Peyton sent in. Baseball is beginning their hunt today for their second straight Super Regional. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, this game starts at 12 p.m. Pacific time on ESPNU, is when they take on San Diego, who have won 10 straight games coming in. So the Toreros are feeling confident, shall we say, and that's who Oregon plays on Friday. This is a double elimination, 4-team, essentially round-robin tournament. You play until everybody but one team has got 2 losses and has been eliminated. Last year, Oregon was in a pretty challenging regional. I forget who the other 2 teams were, but they were in Nashville playing against Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt is a great program. And they were a great team a year ago. And Oregon got it done. Baseball is much more like basketball than it is football in that anybody can beat anybody. The best teams might prevail at the end, but you can make a magical run. Like, can Oregon win the College World Series? Yes, absolutely. That is 100% possible. It is baseball. Baseball postseason is far less predictable than football, especially at the college ranks. The number one thing they have to do is get their bats going. It's been about a month, or since the beginning of the month, since Jacob Walsh hit a home run. And if you want an even more in-depth preview, Jared Mack had a great interview and podcast discussion over on Odds and Audibles. I'd recommend giving that a listen. But I think everybody would agree they got to get the bats going. They've been cold. They put up 4 runs in 2 games combined, 2 in each game in the Pac-12 tournament. They were facing the Pac-12 Pitcher of the Year for Utah. But to then come out against USC and lose the game again 4-2, it's disappointing. That was definitely disappointing, and I didn't care for it. It's not like I'm not going to watch the game or follow along because, they just got no chance. They got no hope. No, they do. Baseball makes arguably less sense than basketball sometimes when it comes to postseason performances, but the bats have to heat up. Jacob Walsh has got to hit. It cannot be all Mason Neville and Maddox Maloney. Other guys have got to find a way to barrel up the ball and put some runs on the board because the pitching has been good. But speaking of the pitching, I think whoever's starting, and that's not going to get announced until well after I'm recording this show, I think the starters have to go 5 or more innings. I think whether you're starting Grayson Grinsell or RJ Gordon, I would presume it'll be one of those two, and you have Brock Moore coming out of the pen. That's what I would go with if I was Mark Wazikowski, and Moore is the flamethrower that can hit triple digits but sits really in the mid to upper 90s consistently with a good slider. He can give you multiple innings, and that's a valuable thing to have coming out of the bullpen because they don't really have those guys. Michael Friend and there was another name who's escaping me right now. Like, they're multiple inning guys, long relievers or Tuesday starters this year. Those guys got hurt, unfortunately. Now, maybe you look at Kevin Sider, the Sunday starter, and say, that's your long reliever now coming out of the pen if you need multiple innings. And Sider's had some really, really good moments this season, but I think the starters have got to be able to go 5+. I don't think this is a bullpen, though they have good arms on the back end, like Logan Mercado and Brock Moore and several other guys as well. I don't think they're a bullpen that can come in and take 5 innings of the game. I think they are best suited to get through 3 and allow 1 or 2 runs or fewer, obviously. So I would love to see Gordon or Grinsell give you at least 5 to 6 quality innings, just just generate a quality start. You go out there 6 innings, 3 runs, and then the bullpen comes in 3 innings, 1 run, and that's essentially the formula they had in the Pac-12 tournament. That's got to be enough, and you got to find a way to hit. And you're going against teams that have really good pitchers, but that's kind of the formula I'm looking for. Get quality starts out of whoever takes the mound, and then get the bats going. And it's going to be tough. San Diego's a really confident baseball team. Santa Barbara is really good, and Fresno State is the other team in this regional. Only one can emerge and head to the Super Regionals, and Oregon begins that quest. 12:06 p.m. Pacific time is the first pitch. Games on ESPNU. This question came in from Peyton. This is a fun question to just wrap up the week and send us off into the weekend. A good mailbag question. That was him asking, what would a good mailbag question be? I challenge you. Make a baseball team using the football team, including pitching coach, first and third base coach, and you cannot use Bryce Betcher. Game on. Game on indeed. So I can only think about these positions from a defensive standpoint, because I haven't seen anyone swing a bat other than Bryce Betcher, because I don't know if any of these guys have even played baseball before. I'm sure some have at some point in time. But the pitching coach has to be Will Stein. Quarterbacks coach, pitching coach, that lines up. So Will Stein's a pitching coach, no doubt about it. At first base, I'm putting Tosh, the defensive coordinator, and then Dan is going to be over at third. So that's what I would do for the coaching staff. Now, as for the actual positions themselves, I gave this a good amount of thought. You got to have rangy guys in the outfield. So I'm putting Kobe Savage in left. I'm putting maybe the most dynamic and explosive athlete on the team in center in Evan Stewart. He could cover a ton of ground out there. I'm putting Kingston Lopa in right. Little bit of height. Could be a rangy guy. I think Lopa, a true freshman in 2024, has got immense potential. And I like what he can bring to the football field, and I think he could be a really good rover out there in right field. So those 3 guys, I feel like they cover a lot of ground. Now we go around the infield. Third base is typically someone that is big and agile, but not thick like a catcher, or, kind of chunky and just a power hitter like a first baseman. What's a combination of athleticism and size? That's Kenyon Sadiq, the guy who I was talking about earlier on today's show as a breakout candidate for this season. So Sadiq would be at third. You need someone not too tall but not too short that moves around well at shortstop. And that's Gary Bryant Jr., right? He's 5'11", whereas other guys are a bit taller. I think Gary Bryant would be shortstop. Second base was the easiest one. Like, it's usually the smallest guy on the team. Who's the smallest guy on the Oregon football team? Tez Johnson, duh. Like, that is the easiest one to put out there. T-Ferg, you got to have a big range, and you got to have great hands. He's playing first. 6'5". He's got great hands. I think he could be a master picking the ball out of the dirt. Catcher, you need someone that is a field general, but is also kind of bulky and thick. Jeff Bossa. Dude got huge before the last offseason, and he is field general extraordinaire on the defensive side of the ball. So that one, again, was pretty easy. At designated hitter, just someone who just smashes the ball. Big, hulking, powerful guy. Who was I talking about earlier? Oh, yeah, Shaq McCroy. 6'8", 365. Make him the next Prince Fielder or Aaron Judge. Do whatever you want. But he's got to have some power in those legs. And lastly, Dylan Gabriel is the pitcher, because, I mean, that's just natural, right? Now, I did think about having Gabriel be the catcher, because typically the trio of positions between baseball, football, basketball that tend to align in terms of how cerebral you have to be and the leadership qualities that are required are catcher in baseball, point guard in basketball, quarterback in football. But Gabriel's got to have the best arm. Plus, having a lefty on the mound, always a dynamic element. Makes it harder to steal bases. And, like Clark in the bench warmers, he's got to have the most experience throwing, right? He's got to have some kind of baseball arm. And I imagine he'd be able to hum it in there pretty good. So that'd be my starting lineup. That was a fun question. I enjoyed that. Let's end the week right there. We're ending the month of May right there. To June we go. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.